All right, welcome, everybody. Administration Public Works Committee is called to order. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of January 27. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next item, Alderman Burris.
For your consideration, A1, City of Evanston payroll through January 26, 2014, in the amount of $3,217,465.96.
Do you want to go through?
Yeah, I'll do the next. Do you want to do them all together?
Yeah.
City of Evanston bills for fiscal year 2014, February 11th, 2014, $1,705,553.12. And City of Evanston bills for fiscal year 2013, $1,304,468.19. And credit card activity for period ending December 31st, 2013, in the amount of $121,550.19. That is a motion to approve.
All right, there's a second. I don't see bills list answers up here, are they? There's very few, so. And we're,
I saw your email. Yeah,
thanks. People ready? Yeah. All right, hearing no changes to any of the expenditures. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alderman Grover?
Madam Chair, I move approval of A3.1, which is a contract with CS Geologic LLC for environmental consulting services in an amount not to exceed $32,000.
Second.
Any discussion regarding this matter? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Alderman Braithwaite? This requires a minor addition, an amendment, the city-owned facility electrical costs.
8.32, approval of an electrical supply agreement for 23 city-owned facilities. Staff is recommending approval of electricity supply agreement with a low responsive and responsibility proposer to RFP 14-1404. Did we have an amendment?
Yes, it's this white sheet.
Okay.
Can you put
Alderman Radin, would you like for me to read the amendment?
that- Yes, if you could just read recommended action, that would be good.
Okay. Staff recommends the city council authorize the city manager to execute a 3-year agreement with MC Squared Energy Services. There are 2 North Riverside Suite, 1350 Chicago, Illinois, to provide electrical energy for 23 city-owned facilities for a fixed price of .5489 per kilowatt. The price includes the cost to provide Green E certified renewable energy credits with the wind power generator in Illinois and adjoining state.
Okay. All right. We have a person signed up. We'll call on Junad Rizki. This is the item you signed up for, right?
No, I actually signed up for the first item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll speak to it anyway.
Okay, why don't you, can you wait till after we deal with this, and then I'm sorry, I thought it was on the energy one. I really apologize. Okay, comments, anybody? No. Anybody on this? No. Nice job. Okay. All those in favor of recommending the electrical supply agreement to the council, say aye.
Aye.
And this is for all city-owned buildings. All right. Mr. Rizki, I'm very sorry.
That's all right.
As you know, we're just a recommending body to the council. So.
I understand. I'm going to speak to this item that you just approved.
All right.
Well, you didn't approve it, you just
Identify
recommended
what the item is.
I'm sorry,
and then give
it's
us your
this,
name and address.
the Environmental Consultant Services, A31. The problem that I'm having with this is I'm reading this and I don't understand what it is. I mean, you read this, it says, the described testing is necessary and appropriate for the effective fulfillment of the city's customary due diligence efforts regarding our water and sewer infrastructure in the city and gas monitoring of the former landfill site. So I don't understand, why are we doing this? I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The proposal that's attached here doesn't say anything. It's really not any kind of proposal I've ever seen, because we ought to show the locations of where we're doing the borings. Now, here's my problem with all this. You know, I know people have, someone just told me, well, you know, you're assuming things in these things, but if staff doesn't provide me with information, I can start to assume a lot of things. And I've talked to several people here who have told me some things, and I don't know how accurate any of this is, but I do have my own thoughts about all this. So, I mean, obviously we have a landfill site. It probably is emitting methane gas. So the question is, you know, who was the environmental consultant that even recommended the city's testing procedures and what we're doing here? None of this is shown here.
I'll make you a deal.
Yeah.
Why don't you withhold your suspicions?
All right.
And we'll get somebody up here to answer some of your questions.
Fine. All right.
Cool. All right. Who might that be? I'm looking, who? Grant? I'm looking at Mr. Farrar of our legal department, and then got a whole load of experts here. Mr. Farrar.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Grant for our Corporation Counsel. Obviously, there is a landfill, former landfill located at that site, so it's been quite some time, I believe since 1986, since the city did any soil borings in that particular vicinity. And with respect to what the law department saw a need for was, gee, it's been a while, why don't we go out and drop 3 borings into there and see what's going on? And also, this issue has arisen in terms of the context of the sledding that's been going on and the heavy recreational use, which, mind you, is not sanctioned by the city in any way, shape, or form. But there have been some calls that have been received by the law department, hey, you know, why do you let folks sled on this when it was a former landfill? And we obviously point them to the ordinance, but it also, in the risk management, risk avoidance perspective, that is one of the charges of the law department, we came to the conclusion that it might be appropriate for somebody to go out there and take a look at some of the conditions, since it's not been studied. With respect to some of the particulars, given the weather conditions right now, I don't believe that the soil borings are entirely fixed right now, because everything is got about 50 inches of frost into the ground and there's about 3 feet of snow on the ground. So that's the perspective from the law department. It's customary due diligence.
Does that in any way satisfy your suspicions?
No. You want me to speak or to it or not?
I think I'm going to have to call on Mr. Bobkowitz.
Again, I would just add that the city of Evanston is being proactive, and that's what this is about. We want to make sure that the residents of Evanston are safe. As the city attorney has indicated, from time to time, it's prudent when you have a former landfill in your jurisdiction to do this, and we're choosing to do it now.
Thank you. I'm pretty convinced there are no conspiracies taking place in the background, and that we really are doing exactly what you're saying. So, you know, you can pursue this any way you want, Mr. Riskey, and probably no way to satisfy you, but we're doing our best. All right, moving on.
A 3.3, move approval of the 2014 fuel purchases in the amount of $950,000 from Palatine Oil Company Incorporated. Funding for this is provided from the Fleet Services Major Maintenance Budget for Automotive Equipment.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending this to the council?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, A 3.4.
Madam Chair, I move approval of A 3.4, which is a contract renewal with Wentworth Tire Service for tire repair services in the amount of $25,008.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Chair Rainey. There wasn't a lot of notes in this on this particular item, and I'm just curious to know why we don't have any Evanston businesses bidding on this. There's something special about the tire treads, why we can't find at least one local business here in town to fix some tires?
Mr. Jeske.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lonnie Jeske, Fleet Manager. With respect to your question, Alderman Braithwaite, what we're looking for here under this bid is volume discounts, and we do achieve that. There's many different types and varieties of tires, and there is no local-based business that can provide that at that unit price for us. It's been an ongoing scenario in what we've been doing for the last 10 years, and it suits us well.
Is that all right?
Okay. But from time to time, do we ever, for example, if we get a flat, somebody local fixes it if the car's out on the street, right?
We do have an amount of spare tires already mounted on rims, and typically if we're in service, meaning that we're working, that's something we would do.
So you just do it, we just do it ourselves?
That's correct, with in-house personnel. We also have a number of tires with North Shore Towing, so during off hours, they make that road call for us and do a tire change.
Are these special tires, like truck tires, or this is for the whole fleet?
These are all tires, heavy equipment, tandem axle dump trucks, pieces of equipment, cars, police sedans, everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hearing no other questions, all those in favor of recommending the tire purchase to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, Alderman Burris.
No, Braithwaite.
Is it my turn?
I'm sorry, Braithwaite.
That's right. I'd like to move item 3.5, approval for 2014 cold patch material purchase for Peter Baker and Son.
So, if you notice the exciting items that we have here, but that's what makes the city run, right?
That's right.
All right. I have a question on this. I heard the other day in a report that some of the asphalt plants are opening during the winter this year so that they can provide hot patch because of all the potholes. And I'm wondering, are we in touch with any that might be opening?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. The typical plants that we deal with, and there's one that's fairly close by, I'm not aware that they're opening at any point in time. That type of activity has happened only once that I'm aware of.
It's
in which
happening.
a major interstate highway was in really serious need, and they opened very specialty for it. I can most certainly check into that.
Would you do that? Because
I
it
would
was
love to, yes.
Chicago area plants.
Okay. Yeah, I can absolutely check into it. The cold patch material, the UPM material, is pretty much the traditional material we use at this time of the year to patch potholes with, and it's really the most versatile thing that we use. But certainly, I'll look into the hot mix.
And how are we doing on that? The
Pothole patching?
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Well, in between snowfalls, we put out crews to patch potholes like we did today. If we get a break, we can maximize our opportunity to get out and patch them. But just as frequently as we patch them, they seem to reopen up again, or the hole right next to the hole that we filled. So we still have quite a bit of work to do, but we're doing the best we can to keep up with it.
what is the process we use on our streets, the seal coating or something? Crack seal. Well, if you look on Howard Street, Chicago and Evanston did that street together years ago, and we have done crack sealing. They have not, evidently. If it's an interesting side-by-side comparison. Their side of the street is just really dangerous,
Yes,
and
it is.
our side is not. So, thank you, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jim, while you're still up, just on a separate note, how are we with our salt supply?
We're doing fine at the moment. We still have some that can still be ordered and delivered from our primary supplier. We have about 2,000 tons in the dome at the moment. What we're working with right now is just prudent application rates, prudent timing, prudent use of the salt to try to manage the resource with the idea that, we may never see any more salt than what we've got right now. So, like in really cold temperatures, what happens is we would really need to increase our application rates for it to be effective, which would, potentially be a little bit wasteful while we can wait maybe a day or so, reduce our application rates, use the power of the sun and the warmer temperatures and gain the same effectiveness. So we're just trying to use what we have and make it work for the rest of the year.
Would you explain what you mean by application effectiveness and what you're not doing?
Right.
In order to...
So when the temperatures are warmer, say like when the temperature later this week gets up into the 30s, we can go out and we can put down 1 to 200 pounds per lane mile is the measurement use. When the temperatures are much colder, we need to increase that to 5 to potentially even 600 pounds per lane mile, which means you're effectively tripling, quadrupling the amount of salt that you have to apply to get the same effectiveness. So that's where, when the temperatures are really cold, we can use an awful lot of salt very quickly. And so we're trying to manage that real tightly.
But the issue that came up a couple of times in my ward, you're not really doing the residential streets, right? The salt.
Not until the temperatures get up higher. If we have a serious safety problem, and that's why we inspect a lot of these things, we absolutely will. But if, the center lines are clear and ready to go, then, which a lot of them are, there's really no need to apply any salt.
Okay, all right. Just so people know that it's not just their block, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilmette announced that they weren't doing the residential streets, and I was just under
As
the
a
assumption.
policy, they're not.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Anything else?
No, I just wanted to comment that we traditionally only salt residential's mid-block in the intersections, except when we have an icing situation. So that policy is still in effect. We haven't changed our approach at all.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing none. All right, all those in favor of recommending the purchase of cold patch to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Alderman Burris.
A3.6, I move approval of the renewal of the annual Azteca City Works Maintenance and Support Agreement in the amount of $22,405.
Any discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Madam Chair, I move approval of A3.7, which is a contract with Chicago Communications for the purchase of a new emergency tone alerting system for our fire department in the amount of $219,815.48.
Second.
Any discussion about this? Alderman Grover, do you know about this?
Yeah, Alderman Burris and I both serve on the
Right.
Emergency 911 Committee.
Do you want to, I've heard the tones in the stations before, but maybe people don't really know? Or maybe the chief could, or?
It's more than just an improvement in the tone. There are a lot of other features that come into play with the new system, which will be replacing one that's over 40 years old. And I think there are, Mr. Polinsky and Chief Kleiber are probably better people to explain all the new enhancements to this system and how it will improve not only the life in our station houses, but also the response time for our crews, potentially.
Thank you. Could you just explain the different tones and things? It's a
Sure.
very interesting system.
Chairman Rainey, members of the committee, Greg Kleiber, Fire Chief. As Alderman Grover has explained, this is a system. Our current tone-out system's been in our fire stations and part of our 911 center for the past 40 years. What happens is when a 911 call is received by our telecommunicators, they enter it into the computer-aided dispatch system. They then communicate over the air to each of our fire stations. First is a tone, a very loud, piercing tone, and then they communicate to our firefighters where the call is originated from and what the nature of the emergency is and where we're supposed to go. There is one loud tone, and there is no opportunity for us to adjust that tone itself. So if you've ever been, and I know Alderman Braithwaite, I was with you at Station 4 the other evening, and they're loud, they're piercing. There's no opportunity for us to, it's a physiological, it's a bad physiological response to each of our firefighters, and we've had this kind of system in place for the past 40 years. So what this system will do is an integrated tone, an escalating tone that ramps up in sound. It also affords the opportunity for our firefighters to acknowledge the call in a faster fashion. So there's going to be points in each of the fire stations where they can just hit a button and let the dispatchers know that that the call has been acknowledged. We're received and we've acknowledged it, and we're now en route to where we're supposed to go. As it stands now, we have to go to a base station radio and then pick it up and acknowledge that call to dispatch. So they communicate. It takes several seconds for them to get that out. We have to wait to acknowledge the call before we can then get in the rig and go. And this is going to save response time significantly. So did I answer your question? Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Perry Polinsky, 911 Communications Coordinator. I was just going to reinforce, having worked under the headset for 18 and a half years, how we monitored traffic on the radio channel. Years ago, the channel was open, so in the firehouses, the firefighters had to monitor all of the radio traffic constantly. That was improved later on when we gave them the ability to have night switches in each of the firehouses, so the tone would open up the affected firehouse and they didn't have to listen to all that constant loud chatter. But I can attest to the fact personally that it is a ear-piercing tone. It certainly isn't good for hearing, and as the chief alluded to, physiologically, the blood pressure just shoots to the ceiling. So it'll be a considerable improvement. And I also would like to add, the chief's goal initially was the Heart Saver tone, the acknowledgement button, and to replace the sound system in the firehouses. But with this system and being IP-based, a lot of the future features that we could look to, for example, you can turn the stove off in a firehouse from dispatch. You can set the tones to illuminate the apparatus floor as the call's going out. So we're looking at future features like that.
So it's not connected to the radios, it's connected to the
tone
to the
that's
Wi-Fi.
delivered via the IP network.
Right. Alderman Grover?
Utilizing our fiber optic network rather than the old way. And then there are also advantages, aren't there, so that we can make adjustments at each fire station as to how to adjust the volume or just the intensity of the tone?
Yes,
So that it can accommodate the crew's needs.
correct.
It won't be like, one big uniform sound that goes out.
So it scares people when it goes off, the current one, really, right?
Exactly.
And the majority,
Yeah.
and the majority of the cost of this item, which was budgeted actually in 2012, I think you've told me, is for the equipment itself, and the old system stays in place just as a backup.
Yes, the bulk of it, we're talking about servers, the PA system at the firehouses, the software, and we're planning on retaining the existing tone-out system as a backup so we have some diversity.
Good, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, any other committee members? All right, all those in favor of recommending this purchase of emergency tone alerting system to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move item A 3.8, approval of Schaefer Consulting contract extension. Staff recommends the City Council authorize the City Manager to execute a change order with Schaefer Consulting for financial management, human resource and payroll, HR software system support in the amount of $55,000.
Second.
Any discussion of this one? All those in favor of recommending to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next.
A4, I move approval of change order number 1 for Davis Street Water Main and Sewer Replacement Project with Boulder Contractors for the not-to-exceed amount of $60,592.43 for completing additional construction items for the project. It should be noted that this amount is less $9,000 for non-compliance penalty due to violation of the City of Evanston Local Employment Program Ordinance.
All right. Second?
Second.
Alderman Braithwaite, you want to comment on this?
Well, I just want to thank our city staff for their follow-up. The goal of the MWB committee is to definitely do our oversight, but more importantly, we want to drive compliance, not fine businesses. So thank you, Marty Homayun, Director Robinson.
Following up on that, though, from what the report says, it looks like this company was happy to pay the fine. And, I mean, that's my interpretation, that's my
Right.
opinion. It's not, nowhere does it say that.
Right, right.
But that was their intention all along,
Yeah.
maybe. And I have no idea how to overcome that, but I think we ought to maybe check and see if they've complied with minority women and local hiring requirements when we go into this in the future, because it is easier to pay
Right.
$9,000,
Right,
right?
on a $2.6 million
It is.
project. We'd much rather you hire residents, but that is something that our committee is taking a look at, Alderman Rainey.
Okay.
And
All
I think
right.
in the next month or so, we'll be coming back to a special Monday meeting with a full presentation. Thank you.
All right. Alderman Burris.
Can you remind me, it might have been in the packet and I just missed it, where that penalty amount goes? Does it, that $9,000, does that go into a special fund to help do workforce development? Just wondering.
I think that's a great question, and to be honest, we haven't done a real good job in the past of following up and finding our businesses. So I don't know how much we've collected year to date, but I could tell you there are a few other companies that are also on the watch list, and
Okay.
maybe Marty can give us a good
The first fine
question.
we've ever collected.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we're trying to have companies go into one direction, they don't do it. Once we get that money, we should utilize that to
Right.
do the program, initiate the program that we're trying to have done. So,
I agree.
Okay, let's hear from.
Let's hear it, Marty.
Good
Marty
evening, Madam
Lyons.
Chair, members of the committee. Marty Lyons, Assistant City Manager. As Alderman Braithwaite pointed out, the committee is looking at a lot of potential changes, one of which was discussed in the memo, and that is, well, if you don't comply, one of the things is that you're non-responsive and you can't bid in the next year. But that's not a positive change. That doesn't,
No.
that hurts them, that hurts us. But it certainly serves a clear message. The group is looking at some kind of a scalable type fine system that for the smaller ones, maybe this stays in place, but for larger ones, there's some kind of a percentage. And to the point of where does the money go, we would also be coming back with a change to say that it should be for funding, whether it's our apprenticeship programs or any of our other local employment-driven programs, the mayor's youth task force, anything that's going to help with job training in the city, because that is one of the things that we get from the companies is there's not a big list from which to choose. So our job is to give them a list that is really attractive.
Yeah. Also, determining the fine earlier in the game as opposed to the end. Or determine the lack of compliance.
In this case, we actually determined lack of compliance halfway through the project. So we were on this one right up front. We did not settle until the end, but in the middle of the summer, we were aware in about the 6th to 8th week of the project that went longer than that they had not complied. So we were, and it was at that point that they said they were not going to comply.
I'm thinking second week, you know.
We will work on that.
That's- We should know. I mean, they would have put out notices or, you know, hired, you know, put ads in the paper or whatever, so I think we could find it. Anyway, it's a project for your committee. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, and thank you for bringing that up, Alderman Braithwaite. All right, all those in favor of recommending the change order number 1 to the council regarding the Davis Street project, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next.
Madam Chair, I move committee's approval of Resolution 8R14, which is authorizing our city manager to make an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for our 2014 motor fuel tax street resurfacing program in the amount of $1,400,000.
Would you like to explain that not all of our streets are on here? So if the public is looking at these streets and they see their streets not on here, it might be on another list. Could you explain that just briefly?
Yes. In addition to the MFT street resurfacing, we will also have capital improvement funded streets, which will be primarily some of the primary streets and then also the capital improvement and water main projects. So there will be another list of streets that will be out within the next, for bid within the next 2 months.
And one thing I'd like to add about the motor fuel tax streets, and probably some of the others, is that the Public Works Director drove with aldermen, in most cases, around the various wards, pointing out streets that had been selected or streets that had been reported by our constituents or by ourselves. And so that's really, I mean, not all the streets that need it are on the list, but the worst ones are definitely on the list. So we appreciate your doing that. All right. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. This is traffic signal upgrades, and we have, who's doing this one? Who's doing this one? Alderman Grover, are you next?
No, it's.
Okay, I'll do it, no worries. Item A6, resolution,
Okay.
let me make sure I put everything in front of me. Thank you. Item A6, Resolution 9-R-14, Illinois Department of Transportation IDOT Agreement for Traffic Signal Upgrades. Staff recommends the approval of Resolution 9.R-14, authorizing city manager to sign the Standard Illinois Department of Transportation Cost Participation Agreement for upgrading traffic signals, which has $150,000 budgeted by pedestrian safety improvements. This is for
Second.
action.
Second.
It's a big project.
It's a big project. Somebody want to speak to it?
No.
Okay.
Anybody? Do you?
No? No.
All right, there's a second. All those in favor of wait. There's a clarification regarding funding source.
Okay, where do you want me to, yeah, just point it out and I'll read it. Sorry. I lost my place. Okay. That's right. So just something we want to note, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, the whereas, in compliance with the term of the agreement, it is necessary for the city manager to execute the agreement appropriating, and this is where the change is, the capital improvement funds in the amount of $25,931.35. Now I'll move.
All right, we'll just accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye. Any opposed? All right, now we have items for discussion. Logos on standpipes. Who's doing this?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Dave Stomek, Utilities Director. We're coming tonight to discuss the potential putting logos on the standpipe sites. We brought a recommendation to the City Council to hire a consultant in November that would help us with the contract documents and the inspection of this work. And at that time, there were some questions raised. We do have 2 water towers or standpipe sites. The first one is located at the intersection of Cleveland and Hartree. It was placed in service in 1984. It holds 5 million gallons. It's 85 foot tall. I'm sorry, 85 foot in diameter, 132 foot tall. And because of its height, it can be seen from Main Street, Oakton Street, and James Park, as well as McCormick Boulevard. It was last painted in 1996. That's a picture of it looking south from, or I'm sorry, looking west from Hartree. This is a more current picture, obviously. This is looking at it from James Park, looking north. This is one of the 3 proposed logos that might be placed on that, and that's the city logo just in solid black. This is a city logo color. And then the third and final option would be just the word Evanston in block lettering. The north standpipe is located on Grosse Pointe Road, the west side of Grosse Pointe Road between Central Street to the north and Harrison Street or Old Orchard to the south. This is located right at the corner of the city. You can see that 2 blocks to the west, you're into the golf course in Skokie, and of course the south side of Old Orchard or Harrison Street, all the way at least to Crawford anyway, is in the village of Skokie as well. This is a picture of the tank from Grosse Pointe Road looking west. This is one from the south looking north, and again, this is taken during the winter, but as you can see, there's a lot of tree coverage on this particular site. This is one of the 3 options. Again, this is the black logo. This is the city logo in color, and then the block lettering again. One thing I do want to point out is that the water elevation in these tanks is at the same height, but the ground elevation up at the north standpipe is 30 feet higher than at the south standpipe. So in perspective, the north tank is not nearly as visible or tall as the south standpipe is. And then the questions we have for the city council is, do they want to put logos on the tanks? If so, which logo do they want to use? And then follow up with how many logos would they place on the tank? It's our estimate, well, actually the consultant that we hired to oversee the work, who has more familiarity with this than us, indicates that for each tank it would cost anywhere from $6,000 to $18,000 to put the logos on, with the average cost being around $12,000. The cost to paint the south standpipe is estimated at $1.25 million, and the north standpipe is $1.5 million, so it would be a relatively small cost of the entire project, but it still is a cost.
Did staff discuss the ongoing discussion that we're having regarding the new city seal, or, I mean, because we're talking about that, right? And we haven't reached any conclusion, I don't think. Have we? No. So why don't we just not put anything on until we decide? That's just my opinion.
And Alderman Rainey, members of the committee.
Then Alderman Grover is next. Okay.
We're here asking the question because from the procurement perspective, now's the time to ask. If we need to include it as part of the project, it would be whatever the current city logo is, or we could leave it be. The only reason we're here this evening is, as Mr. Stonebeck mentioned, there was some curiosity raised when we first discussed this project, so we wanted to follow up with that curiosity. But we would not paint a logo that was going to then be out of date. We would paint the whatever logo is, if there's a change, that changed logo.
Alderman Grover?
Mr. Stonebeck, would you refresh us about the painting project for these 2 water tanks? You said last time one was painted was 1996, presumably both, and
The north tank was painted a year later in 1997. So this year in 2014 in the summer, we plan to paint the south standpipe, and in 2015, the north standpipe. And we are preparing the contract documents at this time, and adding the logo at a later date could be done as a change order, but if we can include it in our bid, we'll get more competitive pricing. Adding a change order, you already have the contractor select it, and they could say, this is the price. So
And-
that's why we're trying to bring this forward now to determine whether we should include a logo design into the contract documents or not.
And how far away we away from having the painting contract come before us?
I would think that it would bring it in about 2 months.
How about we put out a request for bids that says with and without the logo?
We could definitely do that. We could have a base bid and then alternate one to include the price for putting in the logo. Again, how many logos, what design, that would all have to be considered for the contractor to be able to provide us a price.
Alderman Burris is going to solve this.
Oh, no. But I think that's a great idea to do with and without. But I would recommend if we're going to do, obviously, we put the new logo, but it has to be a logo, not, in my opinion, the Evanston looks like, I don't know, like, almost like a prison, the way that the block
I don't like it
lettering
either.
is.
It's nasty.
It's not very attractive, so whatever our new logo is or the current logo would be more appropriate for the water tank, I believe.
As many of you are aware, Alderman Holmes is ill, but is watching at home on television, and she has a comment. And her comment is that she would suggest that we not use a logo, but paint Evanston, because the word Evanston will not change.
My point is
We
not that
could-
particular,
We could come back with
Font.
whatever
The
that
font.
font,
is
which
bad.
is
It's
not
very bad.
pleasant.
We could come back with whatever font you like. Again, we're
In
not-
whatever color.
in whatever color.
Yeah, so City of Evanston versus, yeah.
So
It's just
I
not
thi-
pleasing.
I think Alderman Rainey, based on the discussion, the direction to us could be just the wording as a bid alternate, the wording in the logo as a bid alternate, or no bid alternate, and we just paint the standpipes the solid color that they currently are.
I think that's probably excellent summation.
Very good. So what we'll do is we'll do bid alternate for the logo, bid alternate for lettering only, and then once we have those bids back to you, we'll we'll talk about this further.
Okay. Alderman Grover, did you have another comment?
Just to agree with Alderman Holmes.
Okay. All right. Next, we have another item for discussion, and that is the donation boxes that are littering our community from north to south. Pardon me? So, Grant, do you want to make a presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Grant for our Corporation Council. With respect to the draft ordinance that's before you tonight, what staff tried to do is we looked at similarly situated jurisdictions relative to who licenses and how they license boxes, what sort of fees they charge, and then we took a look at some of the case law that's going on out there. And what we've submitted for discussion purposes in draft form for your consideration this evening is the ordinance which would regulate collection boxes, charging a reasonable fee. One of the key provisions is non-governmental organizations or 501c3 chartered organizations that are located within Evanston would still be licensed, but they would not be charged the applicable fee. There's also language in the draft ordinance that mandates that the owner of the box is responsible for maintenance, and that the box should not be encroaching sight lines, should not be causing a potential hazard in the right-of-way or relative to traffic or pedestrian issues. And if the box has to be removed, that the city could go ahead and remove it. However, that would be a lien upon the property and against the operative holder. And with that, I'm happy to take questions and comments.
A lien against the property and operative? What do you mean by operative?
If you'll give me a minute, let me get to that particular.
Operative.
With respect to the possible penalty in Section 1 of the proposed ordinance. The city may remove any box after a 48-hour period. Obviously, it would be notice to the licensee with the collection box. The property owner with the collection box would be having to pay the removal fee. The licensee and the property owner are jointly and severably liable for adhering to the provisions relative to maintenance and making sure it doesn't encroach upon the public way.
Okay. I sent everybody a photo of a box at Howard and Clyde with graffiti on it. After I sent that, that graffiti was removed, and as of the time I left my house tonight, the graffiti was back on the box. It's a chronic problem. Alderman Grover.
So, Mr. Farrar, the licensee in this case could be the property owner, the collection box owner, anyone else who, with the permission of the property owner, decides to place a collect. So it could be anybody who's the licensee in this case.
Correct, and that is the one sort of uncharted piece of territory here. We don't know exactly the roster of possible licensees until they come in and start applying for the licensees. I suspect, based upon our review of other similarly situated jurisdictions, that'll be sort of a half and half, that there could be a property owner with some kind of interest that might have a box some way, shape, or form connected to their property. In other cases, it could be the one-offs that you see around that are from, independent organizations that have no relation to the property itself.
So I think my concern is then, how do we get notice to property owners that they could be jointly and severally liable for a non-compliant collection box on their property, but also that, and they also have some other obligations, and that they need to give their permission before. How do we give them notice?
And they don't.
That their permission is necessary for the placement of a collection box.
And Alderman Grover, in some cases in my ward, the property owner never gave permission, was never contacted. The boxes just appear.
So, like in that situation, I'd be concerned that we would be penalizing a property owner who doesn't understand that there would be this regulatory framework and they would be liable. Is there a way to make sure they get notice of it, or?
Well, with respect to the implementation, there would be an outreach effort. There would be some sort of educational conduct built into this. You do raise a good point. One of the things that is hard to do from a drafting standpoint is to get into that specific issue. And again, we don't know who's going to be coming in. We don't know the full universe. We have an anecdotal idea, but with certain new enforcement issues, it's kind of a go along and see what happens approach in the first year. I think that there is some enforcement latitude, some leniency that we could perhaps build in. A grace period is another area that we could explore, as we listen to the feedback on this.
That makes sense, because you can see the situation where the collection box is there, it's not compliant or unlicensed, and the owner said, I didn't know that I was involved in this. And
in the long run, I think it's going to help the owner of the property who doesn't want the box. I mean, they
doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know how to get redress for an unwanted collection box.
Mr. City Manager.
And Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, the other issue that I think we'd like to talk just briefly about is Evanston organizations that at least one that I'm aware of, perhaps two Evanston organizations utilize these boxes, so we would want to be mindful of that and not make this onerous for their continued use.
Right, ESCA.
Connections for the Homeless, and I believe perhaps the YWCA
has its own, and ESCA has a big box behind the District 65 building for collections.
We would want to be mindful of that, and I think would want the ordinance to reflect that in some way, that either these are no-fee licenses for Evanston organizations or something that would provide some standing for that. I think, as Alderman Rainey has mentioned, the vast majority of these are unaffiliated boxes. They merely say donate clothing, donate shoes. There's no other identification whatsoever on the boxes, and are largely there, from our experience in trying to do some code enforcement work, not at the pleasure of the property owner, nor, unfortunately, is the property owner prepared to remove the box in many cases because of the unwieldiness of them. So I think that the ordinance is very timely. There are not a lot of communities that are faced, I think, with this problem in the metropolitan area. So we wanted to bring it here first for discussion to make sure that we're on the right track. I imagine they will come out of the woodwork, some of these private entities, after this discussion this evening. And we just want you to be prepared for that as well, because I think there'll be free speech issues and the whole array of arguments.
Well, they're not newspaper boxes.
Why they should be unfettered. So.
Okay.
Well, these squatter boxes are the ones that are private property. If they're not wanted, we want to make sure the owner has some mechanism for enforcing a license and getting them removed. But I'm again, the notice thing, I'm just concerned that although the ordinance places upon the licensee the burden of notifying the property owner, in the first round, I imagine that we would be then notifying the property owner there's been an application for a license for the collection box on your property.
I don't think that's our job, is it?
Under the ordinance, it's the licensee's job?
No,
Whoever-
I'm saying that once a box organization applies for a license to be on a certain property, it would not be our obligation to notify the property owner.
It should be the licensee.
Right, and they have to provide us with proof that they've done that.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think the committee's making very clear that if this is adopted by the council, that we would make sure that property owners are not penalized for ignorance of this change in rules. So, and again, while there are many in the community, there aren't so many that we won't be able to make sure that notice gets
There are
put out
8
there.
and 10 of these boxes in rows at some of our larger
Absolutely.
big box locations.
And I think we'll be curious, considering, I think Alderman Rainey's referring to one location that we as the city government have difficulty talking to the property owner about projects there. I can't imagine that those 8 or 10 boxes have gone through any kind of approval process for their location. So again, this is an important issue, and we appreciate the committee's guidance. And we'll come back, unless there's other comments, Madam Chair, at a future meeting for introduction and action.
With an ordinance, okay, good, all right. Thank you, Mr. Farrar. I know Alderman Burris wants to raise an issue that from the previous meeting, and so do I. So go first.
Yes, it's actually the A7 will be on tonight's, the ordinance proposed amendments and revision to Title IX, Chapter 1, Section 13, Title IX, Chapter 5, and Title IX, Chapter 16. It's actually about the noise piece of it. And in the ordinance, I think it's page 155 of the packet, that no permits for any machine or device emitting music can be issued to a block party. That seems a little much, that the second part of this, number 2, basically you can't use your cell phone to play music. You can't, if your earphones were too loud. It seems like a lot.
Madam Chair, Alderman Burris. Alderman Wilson is going to propose that this item this evening be continued from the council agenda. He has concerns, I think, larger issues, not so much the ones that you've raised, but some larger issues regarding the noise portions of this. This is not the kind of thing we would like to bring to you multiple times. I think that if we're going to ask the council to make changes, we would like to do this in one step versus multiple steps. So again, from a previous discussion with Alderman Wilson, he had planned to ask that this item be continued. So we are going to do that because he has some larger noise ordinance concerns in his ward that he's concerned that perhaps this ordinance does not properly address. So he'd like some additional time to look at that. So we'll ask that it be continued.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The issue that I want to bring up is the camera issue from our last meeting. I suggested at Call of the Wards that I would perhaps, after discussing this matter with constituents, et cetera, perhaps because I was on the prevailing side of this issue, move to reconsider. I have moved to reconsider in my own mind and have decided that out of respect for our mayor, who is so completely devoted to this project, that I would prefer to have a short discussion with you regarding the placement of cameras on Dodge Avenue despite this grant. And I can tell you right now, and I had a short conversation with Alderman Holmes today, and I might have talked to you about this too, there is not one camera put up by the City of Evanston, in the City of Evanston, in any ward that was not sanctioned by the alderman of that ward. There is no camera in any ward in the City of Evanston where the alderman said, no, do not put that camera there, and it showed up. So if I can, out of respect for all of my colleagues, if you believe a camera on Dodge or on Church in those two corridors where this grant is being proposed to place them, if you want a camera there, you should have a camera there. If I don't want a camera there, I should not have a camera, and I'm talking about, when I say there, in my ward or in, you all decide in your ward. And that's all I'm asking. I am not proposing that I make decisions or that I force a council vote that would make a decision for everybody based on my concerns. So if you can live with that, and if you can support me on that, I would like to just move forward and not discuss this anymore. So I'm wondering how you feel about that. I don't think the tape recorder is recording those nods. So you will prevail upon the mayor and the grant, the writers of the proposal, that this should be included, and I will not, I mean, I'm certain that I don't even have the votes for reconsideration, so I'd just like you to consider my concern. Okay? All right. There. All right. Move to adjourn? Thank you.